Have you ever wondered what it feels like to grow up with a father who runs half the business world in your city? Trust me, it's nothing like the fairy tale people imagine. My dad is the CEO of one of the largest logistics companies in Chicago. Billions in contracts. Warehouses across the country. Politicians who return his calls before they return their spouses. And he believes, truly believes, that success gives him the right to control everything. Including me. He planned my entire life before I could even spell my last name. Which schools I'd attend. Which internships I'd take. Which charities I'd represent at galas. And eventually, which man I'd marry. When I turned 16, he told me something that stuck in my mind like a splinter. Love, he said, swirling his bourbon like it held the secrets of the universe, is a luxury for people without ambition. People like us marry for power. People like us. My name is Olivia Grant. I'm 29 years old, and 6 months ago my father disowned me at my own wedding. In front of 300 guests. But what he didn't know that night, what he absolutely didn't know, was that the poor mechanic he called worthless would soon become the man holding the future of his company in his hands. Before we get into that, if you enjoy dramatic real-life style stories like this, make sure you subscribe to Women Reddit Stories and turn on notifications. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to 8 months ago. Back to the night everything started to fall apart. The Grant penthouse overlooked Lake Michigan like it owned the water. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the living room, reflecting the city lights like stars trapped behind glass. The dining table seated 14 and had been imported from Italy, something my stepmother reminded every guest who ever sat at it. That Thursday night it was just the family. My father, Charles Grant, sat at the head of the table wearing a charcoal suit even though we weren't going anywhere. He always dressed like a man expecting to close a deal. My younger brother Tyler scrolled through his phone while our stepmother Natalie sipped wine and watched my father like a loyal audience member waiting for the next line of dialogue. Dinner had barely started when he spoke. I arranged a meeting for you Saturday afternoon, my father said casually, cutting into his steak without looking at me. I knew that tone. It meant my future had already been decided. With who? I asked carefully. Ethan Caldwell. His father owns Caldwell Freight. We're finalizing a strategic partnership. I thought it would be beneficial for you two to meet. Translation: he wanted me to marry him. I set my fork down slowly. I can't make Saturday. The knife stopped moving. My father looked up. What did you say? I said I can't make Saturday, I repeated, my heart pounding against my ribs. Because the next part was the moment everything would change. There's someone I want you to meet instead. The room went completely still. My stepmother stopped mid-sip. Tyler finally looked up from his phone. My father leaned back in his chair. Someone, he said slowly. Yes. My palms felt damp against the tablecloth. I've been seeing him for 6 months. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. What family? My father asked immediately. I blinked. What? Which family? He repeated, impatience creeping into his voice. Caldwell? Mercer? Don't tell me it's someone from the Bishop Group. You don't know him. That was the wrong answer. My father's jaw tightened. You've been seeing someone for 6 months, he said carefully, and you never introduced him to me. I didn't think I needed permission to date someone. In this family, he replied coldly, you absolutely do. Tyler snorted quietly. Who is he? My father asked. I took a breath. His name is Ryan. Pause. And what exactly does Ryan do? I hesitated. Because the truth sounded ridiculous when placed next to billion-dollar boardrooms. He owns an auto repair shop. The fork dropped from my stepmother's hand. My father didn't react for several seconds. Then he laughed. Not a normal laugh. A sharp, disbelieving sound. You're joking. I'm not. A mechanic? Tyler said, grinning like he'd just heard the punchline to a great joke. He runs his own garage, I said defensively. Olivia, my father said slowly, please tell me you're not serious. I love him. Those 3 words landed on the table like a grenade. My father stared at me as if I'd just announced I was moving to Mars. Love, he repeated. Yes. His expression hardened. In this family, he said quietly, love is a distraction. I leaned forward. No, Dad. Control is. That was the moment I knew I'd crossed the line. I met Ryan 6 months earlier on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. One day I wasn't supposed to have free time. My father had just spent an entire board meeting dismantling a marketing proposal I'd spent 3 weeks preparing. Adequate, he'd called it. The word still echoed in my head when I ducked into a small cafe on the west side to escape the rain. It was nothing like the places my family usually went. No marble counters. No imported pastries. Just wooden tables, mismatched chairs, and the smell of fresh coffee. I ordered a latte and sat near the window trying to breathe. You've been stirring that for 10 minutes. I looked up. Ryan stood beside the table. Tall. Probably 6'2". Dark hair. Warm brown eyes. His flannel shirt had grease stains on the sleeve. And he smiled like the world hadn't spent years trying to mold him into something else. Is it that obvious? I asked. He shrugged and sat down across from me. You look like someone who just got yelled at by a boss who thinks they're smarter than everyone else. I laughed. And just like that, we started talking. 3 hours later we were still there. He told me about the garage he owned in a neighborhood called Bridgeport. About fixing engines with his dad when he was a kid. And the strange part? He never once asked about my last name. Not once. When we left the cafe, he walked me to the subway. I don't care who your family is, he said casually. I just want to know what makes you smile. No one had ever said that to me before. My father didn't wait long to investigate. 3 days after our dinner conversation, I was called into his office at Grant Logistics headquarters. 43 floors above downtown Chicago. His office was designed to intimidate. Glass walls. Massive desk. A painting that probably cost more than most people's houses. A folder sat on the desk. Ryan Mitchell, my father read aloud. Age 33. Owner of Mitchell Automotive. Annual revenue approximately $180,000. He closed the folder. This, he said flatly, is the man you think is worthy of marrying you? He's a good person. My father stood and walked to the window. Good people don't build empires, Olivia. They build families. He turned slowly. You're a Grant. You don't get to live an ordinary life. I met his gaze. Maybe I don't want your version of extraordinary. He pushed the folder toward me. End this now, he said coldly. Before you embarrass this family. I didn't touch the folder. I stood up. And walked out. Behind me, I heard his voice. If you marry that man, he said, you will regret it for the rest of your life. I thought he was bluffing. I had no idea what he was about to do next. And I definitely had no idea what Ryan was hiding. Ryan proposed on a quiet Sunday morning. It wasn't dramatic. No violinists. No photographers hiding in the bushes waiting for the perfect Instagram moment. Just sunlight spilling through the kitchen window of his small apartment and the smell of pancakes burning slightly on the stove. I was sitting at the counter in one of his oversized sweatshirts when he turned around holding a small velvet box. For a moment, I thought he was joking. Ryan, I laughed nervously. What are you doing? He didn't laugh back. He walked toward me slowly and placed the box on the counter between us. I know this isn't the life you grew up with, he said quietly. And I know your father probably hates me already. That part wasn't wrong. But I also know that every day I wake up thinking about you, he continued. And every night I fall asleep wondering how I got so lucky. He opened the box. Inside was a simple diamond ring. Nothing flashy. Just elegant. I can't give you penthouses or private jets, he said. But I can promise you 3 things. I blinked at him. What things? I'll never try to control you. I'll never make you feel small. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy. He took a breath. Will you marry me? I said yes before he even finished asking. Telling my family was a different story. I called my stepmother first. She answered on the second ring. Olivia, sweetheart, she said brightly. How are you? We're getting married, I said. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. You're joking. No. When? In 2 months. Another long pause. Have you told your father? Not yet. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Oh, Olivia, he's going to lose his mind. She wasn't exaggerating. When my father called an hour later, his voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. You're making a mistake. I'm getting married. To a mechanic. To a man who loves me. He sighed like I was a stubborn child refusing to eat vegetables. You want a wedding? He said finally. Yes. Fine. His tone shifted in a way I didn't notice at the time. I'll give you a wedding. A pause. One you'll never forget. I thought he meant he'd come around. I didn't realize he was sharpening a knife. The first attack came quietly. 3 days later, I went to a bridal boutique downtown. I wasn't planning anything extravagant. Just a classic dress I'd seen online. Something simple. The consultant greeted me with a polite smile. Miss Grant, she said. I nodded. I have an appointment. She checked the tablet in her hands. Then her expression changed. I'm terribly sorry, she said carefully, but there seems to be a problem with your account. What do you mean? My credit card declined. Then my second one. Then the emergency card my father had insisted I carry for unexpected expenses. My stomach twisted as I called the bank from the fitting room. Miss Grant, the representative said politely, you've been removed as an authorized user on all accounts connected to the primary holder. And who's the primary holder? You father. Of course he was. I sat on the bench surrounded by wedding dresses I suddenly couldn't afford. For the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying. Everything I owned technically belonged to him. Ryan found me an hour later. I had texted him a single message. Can you come get me? He walked into the boutique and immediately knew something was wrong. What happened? I tried to laugh. My father declared financial war. Ryan didn't ask questions. He simply pulled out his wallet. Inside was a thick stack of $100 bills. At least $2,000. Held together with a rubber band. Let me help, he said gently. I stared at the money. Mechanics didn't usually carry that much cash. But I was too overwhelmed to question it. No, I said automatically. Olivia. I have to figure this out myself. He watched me for a long moment. Then he slid the money back into his pocket. Okay, he said quietly. But I'm here. The social fallout was worse. Within a week, my phone went silent. Friends I'd known since high school suddenly had busy schedules. Lunch plans were canceled. Group chats died overnight. Then the messages started arriving. Always polite. Always apologetic. Hey Liv, my parents think it might be awkward if we hang out right now. You know how business relationships work. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. 25 years of friendships evaporated in a matter of days. At work, It was even worse. I had been part of the marketing department at Grant Logistics for 4 years. The office used to feel like a second home. Now it felt like walking through enemy territory. Conversations stopped when I entered the room. Meetings suddenly happened without me. 2 weeks later, an email from HR arrived. Subject: position review. My role was being reevaluated. I wasn't fired. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they slowly erased me. The corner office I'd worked for was reassigned. Client calls were taken away. I was still technically employed. But I was invisible. Through all of this, one person kept calling. Margaret Lawson. My grandmother's attorney. Her voicemail appeared almost every other day. Olivia, there's a matter regarding your grandmother's estate that requires your attention. I kept ignoring it. I was too busy drowning. Ryan eventually found us an apartment in Pilsen. 2 bedrooms. Old hardwood floors. A tiny balcony overlooking a community garden. When we first walked in, he watched my face nervously. I know it's not much, he said. But I started crying. Not because it was small. Because it felt free. No security guards. No corporate boardrooms. No father controlling every decision I made. Just quiet. Ryan wrapped his arms around me. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I started sending out resumes immediately. Marketing firms. Startups. Agencies. 40 applications in 3 weeks. Every single one rejected me. Sometimes within hours. Chicago's business world was smaller than people realized. And my father's influence was everywhere. One night I sat at the kitchen table staring at another rejection email. Ryan watched me from across the room. Maybe you shouldn't work for someone else, he said. I laughed. With what money? He didn't answer. Just gave me that small smile I was starting to recognize. The one that suggested he knew something I didn't. A week before the wedding, my father showed up. He stood in the doorway of our apartment wearing a tailored navy suit that looked completely out of place in our modest living room. Ryan stood beside me silently. My father didn't greet him. He pulled out a checkbook. $5 million, he said. My heart skipped. Cancel the wedding. Come home. We'll pretend this never happened. I stared at the blank check. $5 million. More money than most people earned in a lifetime. My father watched me carefully. 10 million, he said when I didn't respond. Final offer. Ryan didn't move. Didn't speak. Just wait. I slowly pushed the checkbook back toward my father. I'm not for sale. His face hardened. When this marriage fails, he said coldly, don't come crawling back. Then he turned to Ryan for the first time. You enjoy playing house with my daughter while you can. Ryan met his gaze calmly. I plan to. Something strange happened between them. A moment of tension I couldn't explain. My father's smile faltered for a split second. Then he left. After the door closed, I looked at Ryan. He's going to try something at the wedding. Ryan squeezed my hand. Let him. I frowned. You sound awfully confident. He smiled slightly. I've dealt with men like your father before. I raised an eyebrow. A mechanic dealing with billionaire CEOs? He kissed my forehead. You'd be surprised. I didn't realize then just how right he was. And I definitely didn't realize the wedding was about to become the most humiliating moment of my father's life. He just didn't know it yet. Our wedding was supposed to be small. Ryan and I had spent weeks planning something simple. Nothing like the extravagant ceremonies my father's business circle was used to. Just a warm, intimate celebration with the people who actually cared about us. 50 guests. That was the plan. Mostly Ryan's friends from the garage and a few co-workers of mine who had quietly supported me through everything. The venue was a family-owned restaurant in the West Loop. Brick walls, warm lighting, wooden tables. The kind of place where people laughed loudly and nobody cared about designer labels. It felt real. It felt like us. But when Ryan and I arrived that afternoon, the first thing I noticed was the line of black cars outside the restaurant. Luxury sedans. Chauffeurs standing beside them. My stomach tightened. "Ryan," I said slowly. He followed my gaze. "Yeah," he murmured. "That doesn't look like our guest list." Inside, the restaurant was packed. Not with 50 people. With hundreds. Women in Chanel and Dior dresses. Men in tailored suits worth more than my yearly salary. Expensive watches flashing under the lights. My father's world. All of them turned to look at us. 300 strangers in a room that was supposed to hold 50. My heart dropped. Because standing at the center of it all, holding a glass of champagne like he owned the building, was my father. Charles Grant smiled when he saw me. "Surprise," he said. My stepmother Natalie sat in the front row dabbing fake tears from the corners of her eyes. My brother Tyler leaned against the bar scrolling through his phone like he was bored. I walked toward my father slowly. "What did you do?" I asked. "Oh, come on, Olivia," he said smoothly. "Did you really think I'd let my only daughter get married in a restaurant without proper witnesses? Those aren't witnesses. They're important people. Important people. Meaning investors. Developers. Society reporters. Everyone my father knew who loved a good spectacle." Ryan stepped closer beside me. "You invited them?" I said. "Of course," my father replied. "A wedding is a social event." "No," I said quietly. "This was supposed to be a celebration." His smile didn't move. "And it will be." Something about the way he said it made a chill crawl down my spine. Ryan leaned toward me. "We can leave," he whispered. "Right now. We'll go somewhere else. Just us." I looked around the room. At my father's satisfied expression. At the cameras already pointed toward us. If we walked out now, he would win. "No," I said. Ryan studied my face. "You sure?" I straightened my shoulders. "We're getting married today." He smiled slightly. "Okay." The ceremony itself was beautiful. Despite everything. Ryan stood beside me wearing a simple navy suit. No designer labels. No flashy cufflinks. Just him. The man who had stood beside me when everyone else walked away. Our officiant began speaking, but I barely heard the words. I was too aware of my father watching from the front row. Too aware of the reporters typing on their phones. Ryan squeezed my hand. I looked up at him. And suddenly none of it mattered. Not the crowd. Not the cameras. Not my father's schemes. Just him. When it was time for vows, Ryan spoke first. "I know the last few months haven't been easy," he said quietly. Soft laughter rippled through the room. "But I wouldn't change a single second of it. Because every challenge brought us here." He looked straight into my eyes. "You chose me when it would have been easier not to. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that choice." My throat tightened. When it was my turn, I took a shaky breath. "I grew up believing success meant power," I said. "Money. Influence. Winning every deal." I glanced briefly toward my father. "But then I met you. And you showed me something better." Ryan's expression softened. "You showed me what respect looks like. What kindness looks like. What real partnership feels like." My voice cracked. "I choose you. Today and every day after." The officiant smiled. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. For one perfect moment, the room disappeared. Ryan kissed me. And everything felt right. Until the clinking started. A spoon tapping against glass. Slow. Deliberate. The entire room turned. My father stood, holding a champagne flute. A toast, he announced. My stomach dropped. Ryan's hand tightened around mine. Here we go, he murmured. My father walked slowly toward the center of the room. The crowd fell silent. 300 people watching. Phones already raised. I'd like to say a few words about my daughter, he began smoothly. Natalie dabbed her eyes again. Tyler smirked. I built Grant Logistics from the ground up, my father continued. Every warehouse, every contract, every dollar earned through hard work. He paced slowly. And I always imagined that one day my daughter would marry someone worthy of that legacy. He stopped in front of Ryan. Looked him up and down. Instead, he said loudly, she chose this. A ripple moved through the room. A mechanic, my father said, his voice dripping with contempt. Gasps spread across the tables. A man with grease on his hands and nothing to offer but empty promises. I felt Ryan stiffen beside me. Phones lifted higher. Recording. My father raised his glass. So tonight I'd like to make something very clear. He turned toward the crowd. From this moment forward, Olivia Grant is no longer my daughter. The room went completely silent. My chest tightened. She is removed from my will, he continued coldly. Stripped of her inheritance and any claim to Grant Logistics. Natalie looked down. Tyler smiled. Let this be a lesson, my father said. When you choose poverty over family, you get exactly what you deserve. He set the glass on the table. And walked away. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Ryan stood up. Slowly. Calmly. He adjusted his tie. And looked my father directly in the eyes. Thank you for coming, Mr. Grant. My father turned. Excuse me? Ryan smiled slightly. And thank you for your blessing. Laughter broke out in the crowd. My father's face darkened. I just told you you're getting nothing, he snapped. I heard you. Ryan stepped closer. And I want you to know we don't need it. My father laughed harshly. You own a garage worth less than my watch. Ryan's smile didn't fade. I have something more valuable than money. Oh, my father sneered. What's that? Ryan took my hand. Her. The crowd murmured. But Ryan's calm expression didn't change. And for just a moment, I saw something flicker across my father's face. Uncertainty. Like he suddenly realized he might be missing something important. But he quickly dismissed it. Enjoy your poverty, he said coldly. Then he walked out. Natalie and Tyler followed. The door slammed shut behind them. For a few seconds no one moved. Then someone started clapping. One person. Then another. Soon the entire room erupted in applause. Ryan looked at me. Still no regrets? I laughed through tears. Not a single one. But as the music started and the celebration resumed, I couldn't shake one strange thought. Ryan hadn't seemed surprised. Not even a little. And that calm confidence in his eyes. It felt like he knew something about my father's future that none of us did. The honeymoon period lasted about 6 weeks. Not the romance part. Ryan and I were happier than we'd ever been. Living in our little apartment in Pilsen, figuring out how to build a life that didn't depend on my father's approval. No, what ended was the illusion that things would get easier. Because once the wedding drama faded from the headlines of Chicago's social pages, reality settled in. And reality was expensive. I had applied to 32 marketing positions across the city. Entry-level. Mid-level. Even internships I technically didn't need with my experience. Every single one rejected me. Some within hours. Some without even acknowledging my application. One recruiter had the decency to tell me the truth. Your father called. That was it. That was the entire explanation. Chicago's corporate world ran on relationships, and my father had spent 30 years building the kind that closed doors as easily as they opened them. And now every door was closed to me. One night I sat at our small kitchen table staring at another rejection email. Ryan stood by the window watching the city lights flicker across the skyline. Maybe you shouldn't work for someone else, he said quietly. I looked up. With what money am I supposed to start a business? He didn't answer. Just gave me that same small smile he always did when he knew something I didn't. Sometimes that smile comforted me. Other times it made me curious. The next morning I finally called Margaret Lawson, my grandmother's attorney. Her office was inside an old brick building on the near north side. The kind of place that smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. Margaret greeted me warmly. Olivia, she said. I'm so glad you came. You said something about my grandmother's estate. Yes. She motioned for me to sit. My grandmother didn't have much money, I said carefully. Most of the family wealth came from my father. Margaret smiled slightly. Your grandmother was smarter than you think. She opened a folder and slid it across the desk. Before she passed away, Margaret Grant established a private trust. My brow furrowed. A trust? Yes. Independent of your father's control. I blinked. Why would she do that? Margaret folded her hands. Because she knew exactly what kind of man your father was. The words hung in the air. And she gave very specific instructions, Margaret continued. The trust was to remain secret unless one condition was met. What condition? You married someone your father didn't approve of. I stared at her. You're serious? She nodded. Very. Margaret opened the folder. The trust contains $500,000 in diversified investments. I couldn't speak. $500,000. My grandmother's final gift. There's also a letter, Margaret said gently. She handed me a piece of cream-colored paper. I recognized my grandmother's handwriting instantly. My hands trembled as I read. My dearest Olivia. If you're reading this, it means you finally chose your own path. And that makes me prouder than any inheritance ever could. Your father believes money is power. Your grandfather and I learned something different. Love, integrity, and independence matter far more. This money isn't meant to make you rich. It's meant to make you free. Build something of your own. Something no one can take from you. With all my love. Grandma Maggie. I cried in Margaret's office for nearly 20 minutes. But for the first time in months. They were tears of hope. 5 months after the wedding, Thornton Creative was born. I named the company after my grandmother's maiden name. A deliberate break from the Grant legacy. The office was nothing more than a rented desk inside a co-working space in River North. But it was mine. My first client was the same cafe where Ryan and I had met. They needed help managing their social media. I charged them half my usual rate just to build a portfolio. The second client was a bookstore in Lincoln Park. Then a bakery in Wicker Park. Then a small tech startup in Naperville. The work spread through word of mouth. Not through elite corporate networks. Through real people. People who cared about results instead of last names. Within 2 months, I had more work than I could handle alone. Ryan watched me one evening as I worked on a campaign from our kitchen table. I'm proud of you, he said. I smiled tiredly. I couldn't have done this without my grandmother's trust fund. You could have. No, I said honestly. I needed that safety net. Ryan leaned back in his chair. Sometimes the universe gives us exactly what we need. His calm confidence still fascinated me. Sometimes it almost felt like he was watching the future unfold. That same week, I received an email that made my heart skip. Subject: Partnership Inquiry. The sender was a company called Nexus Dynamics. I'd never heard of them. But one quick search changed that. Nexus Dynamics was one of the fastest-growing artificial intelligence companies in the country. Valuation: over $4 billion. They were looking for a marketing firm to help with a series of startup partnerships. My tiny agency. Out of hundreds of firms. Somehow they had contacted me. I reread the email 3 times. Ryan walked into the room while I was still staring at my laptop. "What's wrong?" I turned the screen toward him. "Nexus Dynamics just contacted my company." His eyebrows lifted. "Oh. They want to talk about a marketing partnership." Ryan leaned closer. His expression changed slightly. Then that small mysterious smile appeared again. "Interesting. You've heard of them?" "Everyone in tech has." "Well," I said nervously, "I guess I should reply." "Definitely," he said. But something about his tone felt amused. The tech industry in Chicago was buzzing about Nexus Dynamics that month. They were planning to build a massive AI data center in the Midwest. A deal worth over $50 million. Every major real estate developer in the city wanted the contract. Including my father. I learned that from Tyler's Instagram. He had posted a picture of my father shaking hands with someone at a conference. Caption: "Big things coming. Grant Logistics plus Nexus Dynamics equals unstoppable." I rolled my eyes and kept scrolling. But a few days later Ryan came home with that same curious expression on his face. "Did you see the news about Nexus Dynamics?" he asked. "The data center thing?" "Yeah. Everyone's talking about it." Ryan sat beside me. "What would you say if I told you your father isn't going to get that deal?" I laughed. "How would you know?" He shrugged. "I know a few people in the tech world." I narrowed my eyes playfully. "Since when does a mechanic have connections in Silicon Valley?" Ryan kissed my forehead. "You'd be surprised." I shook my head. "You're impossible." But deep down, that strange feeling returned. Like there were pieces of Ryan's life I hadn't seen yet. Pieces that didn't quite match the image of a small garage owner. 2 weeks later Ryan came home holding a thick envelope. Heavy cream paper. Gold lettering. "Open it," he said. I slid the card out carefully. It was an invitation. The Chicago Technology Foundation Gala. One of the most exclusive events in the city. 500 guests. CEOs. Investors. Politicians. My stomach tightened. "Ryan, why do we have this?" He smiled softly. "Because we're going." I looked closer at the card. Then my eyes widened. Guest of honor, Ryan Mitchell. I slowly looked up at him. "Ryan." My voice dropped to a whisper. "Who exactly are you?" He stepped closer and took my hands. "The man who loves you," he said gently. "And soon, the man who's going to explain everything." My heart began to race. Because suddenly, a lot of things started making sense. The late-night phone calls. The stacks of cash. The strange calm confidence he always had around powerful people. But I still couldn't imagine the truth. Not yet. And neither could my father. Especially not the part where the poor mechanic he had humiliated was about to walk into the biggest tech gala in Chicago. As the most powerful man in the room. 2 weeks before the gala, Ryan sat me down at the kitchen table. It was early Sunday morning. Our usual pancake morning. But the mood felt different. He wasn't smiling the way he usually did. He looked nervous. And in the entire time I had known him, I had never seen Ryan Mitchell nervous. "I need to tell you something," he said. My stomach tightened immediately. "That sounds serious." "It is." He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "But I need you to promise me something first." "What?" "Let me finish before you react." That didn't make me feel better. But I nodded anyway. "Okay." Ryan took a slow breath. "The garage is real," he said. "I do own Mitchell Automotive. And I do actually fix cars there." I blinked. "Ryan. I've been there." "I know." He smiled faintly. "But it's not what I do for a living." My brain paused. "What does that mean?" He looked directly into my eyes. "It means the garage is more of a hobby." "A hobby?" "A place where nobody knows me." My heart started beating faster. "Ryan." He ran a hand through his hair. "I work in tech, Olivia." That part alone surprised me. But it didn't explain the gala invitation. "How involved in tech?" I asked carefully. He hesitated. Then said the most confusing sentence I'd heard all week. "Significantly." I stared at him. "That is the most suspicious answer you could possibly give." He laughed quietly. "Fair. So what does significantly mean?" Ryan leaned back in his chair. "It means I'm not poor." I crossed my arms. "I already suspected that." "And it means," he continued slowly, "I've been hiding a big part of my life." My stomach twisted. "Why?" His expression softened. "Because I needed to know something." "What?" "That someone could love me without knowing what I'm worth." My heart sank slightly. "You didn't trust me?" "I didn't trust the world," he corrected gently. There was a long silence. Then I said quietly, "Ryan, you're scaring me." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the same cream-colored envelope from before. "You're going to understand everything at the gala." I stared at him. "You still aren't answering the question." He slid the invitation across the table. "Look closer." I picked up the card again. Chicago Technology Foundation Gala. Guest of honor, Ryan Mitchell. My voice dropped to a whisper. "Guest of honor?" Ryan nodded. My mind raced. "Ryan, who are you?" He stood up and walked around the table. Then gently held my face in his hands. "I'm your husband," he said softly. "And the rest." He smiled that mysterious smile again. "You'll see for yourself." The 2 weeks leading up to the gala felt surreal. I couldn't stop researching Nexus Dynamics. Every article I read said the same thing. The company had revolutionized artificial intelligence in logistics, healthcare, climate modeling, and transportation. Their technology was everywhere. But the strangest part? No one had ever seen their CEO. The founder was famously private. No interviews. No press conferences. No public photos. One Forbes article called him the phantom billionaire. A young tech genius who had built a $5 billion company while staying completely invisible. No one even knew his real age. Just rumors. Speculation. The more I read, the more something uncomfortable settled in my stomach. Because certain details felt familiar. Late-night business calls. Board meetings Ryan mentioned casually. The calm way he handled powerful people. And the mysterious older man at our wedding who had greeted Ryan like they were equals. The pieces were there. But my brain refused to put them together. Because the answer felt too ridiculous. The night before the gala, Ryan gave me a dress. A black Valentino gown. Elegant. Simple. Beautiful. And definitely far too expensive for a mechanic's budget. I ran my fingers over the fabric. "Ryan." "Yeah?" "How much did this cost?" He winced slightly. "That's not an important question." I laughed nervously. You're right. That's a terrifying answer. He stepped closer. Are you angry? I looked up at him. That you lied to me? Yes. I thought about it. You didn't lie, I said slowly. You just omitted several extremely important facts. Ryan nodded. Fair. Am I mad? I repeated. I shook my head. I'm mostly confused. He kissed my forehead. Tomorrow you won't be. The Chicago Technology Foundation Gala was held inside the Art Institute. The entire building had been transformed. Crystal chandeliers hung above the grand hall. Music echoed softly through the marble corridors. 500 of the most powerful people in technology, finance, and politics filled the room. Women in couture gowns. Men wearing tailored suits and billion-dollar confidence. And somehow, Ryan moved through the crowd like he belonged there. People nodded when he passed. Some even stepped aside respectfully. I noticed it immediately. But I was too overwhelmed to ask questions. Until I saw my father. Charles Grant stood near the bar talking to two investors. Natalie was beside him in a silver dress, scanning the room for important people. Tyler leaned against a column checking his phone. My father noticed me first. His expression went through several emotions. Surprise. Confusion. Then irritation. He walked over. Olivia, he said coldly. Dad. His eyes moved to Ryan. Oh, he said dryly. You again. Ryan nodded politely. Mr. Grant. My father looked around. You two managed to sneak into this event? I felt my face heat. We were invited. He laughed. That's adorable. Ryan didn't react. My father leaned closer. You should leave before security realizes you don't belong here. Ryan simply checked his watch. They'll realize something soon, he said calmly. My father smirked. What's that supposed to mean? Before Ryan could answer, the lights dimmed. A hush fell across the room. Large screens lit up around the hall. The Nexus Dynamics logo appeared. A sleek silver design glowing against a dark background. The host stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced. Tonight marks a historic moment. My father leaned forward slightly. The founder of Nexus Dynamics has remained private since the company began. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. But tonight, the host smiled. For the first time ever. Ryan squeezed my hand. I looked at him. He looked strangely calm. Like he had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Please welcome the CEO and founder of Nexus Dynamics. The host paused. Mr. Ryan Mitchell. My heart stopped. The room exploded into applause. Ryan let go of my hand. And walked toward the stage. My father's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. Natalie's mouth fell open. Tyler stopped scrolling. And I stood there in complete shock. Watching my husband, the mechanic my father called trash, walk onto the stage as one of the richest men in America. The applause inside the grand hall felt endless. 500 of the most powerful people in Chicago were standing. Clapping. Cheering. Watching the man my father had mocked at my wedding step onto the stage like he owned the future. Because apparently, he did. The giant screens behind him lit up with a sleek graphic. Ryan Mitchell. Founder and CEO, Nexus Dynamics. My brain struggled to process what I was seeing. Ryan stood under the lights with the same calm confidence I'd always known. But now the entire room saw it too. He adjusted the microphone slightly. Good evening, he said. His voice carried across the massive hall effortlessly. I know many of you expected someone older. Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. But innovation rarely comes from people who are comfortable. He spoke for nearly 20 minutes. About artificial intelligence. About building systems that could revolutionize supply chains. About using technology to solve global problems. He was brilliant. Confident. Charismatic. The man standing on that stage didn't look like someone who fixed engines in a garage. He looked like someone who built empires. And apparently, he had. But I barely heard any of his speech. Because I was watching my father. Charles Grant sat frozen at his table. Completely still. The color had drained from his face. Natalie leaned toward him, whispering urgently. He didn't respond. Tyler looked like someone had unplugged his brain. For the first time in my life. My father had absolutely no idea what to do. When Ryan finished speaking, the standing ovation was even louder than before. The host returned to the stage, smiling. Ladies and gentlemen, the visionary behind Nexus Dynamics. The applause continued. Ryan stepped down from the stage. And immediately a crowd surrounded him. Investors. Politicians. Media executives. Everyone wanted his attention. But Ryan didn't stop for any of them. He walked directly toward our table. Toward my father. My heart started racing. The room noticed immediately. Phones came out. People whispered. Because suddenly, the most powerful tech CEO in the country was walking straight toward one of Chicago's most ruthless corporate leaders. Ryan stopped in front of him. Mr. Grant, he said politely. My father looked up slowly. You. It wasn't a question. Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Simple. Black. Elegant. He placed it on the table. Ryan Mitchell. Founder and CEO, Nexus Dynamics. I believe you've been trying to arrange a meeting with my company, Ryan said calmly. My father stared at the card. His hands trembled slightly. You're. He swallowed. You're the CEO. Yes. You're the one behind Nexus Dynamics. Ryan nodded. Yes. My father blinked several times. The reality was clearly crashing into his brain all at once. Because the numbers were public knowledge. Nexus Dynamics was worth nearly $5 billion. Ryan Mitchell was worth more than double my father's entire fortune. The mechanic was a billionaire. And my father had publicly called him trash. But Charles Grant didn't build an empire by staying stunned for long. Within seconds, the shock disappeared. His posture straightened. His business smile returned. The same one he used when negotiating multimillion-dollar deals. Ryan, he said smoothly, standing up. I had no idea. He extended his hand. This is incredible news. Truly incredible. Ryan didn't take it. I always told Olivia she had excellent taste, my father continued. The lie was so blatant it almost made me laugh. Ryan's expression remained calm. You told me I was a parasite, he said quietly. My father froze. You called me a grease monkey. Several people nearby leaned closer to listen. Phones lifted higher. You said I had nothing to offer your daughter, Ryan continued. My father forced a small laugh. That was before I understood who you were. Ryan tilted his head slightly. Who I was? Yes, my father said quickly. A brilliant entrepreneur. A visionary. Ryan folded his arms. Whether I fixed cars or ran a tech company, I was the same man. The room had gone completely silent around us. The only thing that changed, Ryan continued, is how much you think I'm worth. My father's smile strained. Well, let's not dwell on misunderstandings. He gestured toward a nearby table. I'd love to discuss the data center project. Ah. There it was. The real reason my father was suddenly so friendly. The Nexus Dynamics data center contract. $50 million. Ryan glanced at me briefly. Then back at my father. I've already made a decision about that deal. My father nodded eagerly. Excellent. I'm sure we can work out a mutually beneficial partnership. Ryan's voice remained calm. Nexus Dynamics will not be partnering with Grant Logistics. The words hit the table like a bomb. My father's smile disappeared instantly. What? I said no. Why? Ryan didn't raise his voice. But everyone could hear him. Because I don't do business with people who treat their families like assets. A murmur spread through the room. My father's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. Ryan slid his arm around my waist. Your daughter chose love over money, he said calmly. You punished her for it. He stepped back. I don't reward that kind of behavior. The whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Phones recorded everything. By morning, the entire business world would know. Charles Grant had just lost the biggest deal of his career. To his own son-in-law. I need to pause here for a second. Did you see that coming? Be honest. Type shocked in the comments if the twist surprised you, or called it if you figured it out earlier. And if you've ever had someone underestimate you because of how you looked or where you came from, you already know the lesson here. Never judge someone by appearances. Now let's finish the story. Because what happened next was even more satisfying than the reveal itself. The fallout was immediate. And brutal. By midnight, the video from our wedding had resurfaced online. Someone had finally posted the entire recording of my father's toast, the moment he stood in front of 300 guests and called my husband trash. Now that video had context. And the internet wasted no time connecting the dots. The headlines started appearing before we even got home that night. Chicago CEO publicly humiliates son-in-law, turns out he's a tech billionaire. Grant Logistics executive loses $50 million deal after insulting Nexus Dynamics founder. The most expensive toast in corporate history. Social media had a field day. Every business forum. Every tech blog. Every Chicago news site. The video spread everywhere. My father's voice echoing through a ballroom. A mechanic with nothing to offer. Cut immediately to footage from the gala. Ryan standing on stage as the CEO of a $5 billion company. The internet loves irony. And this was perfect irony. Within a week, two of Grant Logistics' biggest partners announced they were reevaluating their strategic relationships. One major investor pulled out of a warehouse expansion project. Another delayed funding on a shipping contract worth millions. Suddenly, my father's reputation wasn't intimidating anymore. It was embarrassing. Because in the business world, judgment matters. And Charles Grant had just demonstrated very publicly that his judgment was terrible. But the most satisfying moment came 3 days later. When Tyler showed up at our apartment. He knocked on the door like a normal person. Which was already unusual. Ryan opened it. Tyler stood there wearing an expensive jacket and the awkward expression of someone who had rehearsed their speech. Hey, he said. Ryan leaned against the doorframe. Hey. Tyler glanced past him into the apartment. Olivia here? I am, I said, walking over. Tyler scratched the back of his neck. Look. I wanted to say something. Ryan folded his arms quietly. Tyler cleared his throat. The stuff I said before, the jokes, the Instagram posts. He looked down. That was immature. Ryan watched him carefully. Tyler continued quickly. And obviously things are different now. With the Nexus thing and everything. Ah. There it was. Ryan tilted his head slightly. You're apologizing, he said calmly. Or you're networking? Tyler's face flushed. Come on, man. Ryan didn't smile. Grant Logistics and Nexus Dynamics could do incredible things together, Tyler said quickly. Think about the partnerships. Ryan stepped aside and opened the door wider. For a moment Tyler looked hopeful. Then Ryan spoke. The same Grant logistics that disowned my wife? Tyler's expression faltered. The same family that mocked her for marrying me? Tyler opened his mouth. Ryan gently closed the door. You made your choice 6 months ago, he said calmly. We're not family. Click. The door shut. Tyler stood in the hallway. And that was the end of that conversation. Some apologies only happen when people realize you're valuable. Ryan understood that better than anyone. My stepmother tried next. She called 3 times before I answered. Olivia, sweetheart, Natalie said immediately. I've been so worried about you. I leaned back against the couch. Have you? Of course. You're still family. Her voice had that sugary tone she used when manipulating people. You know your father never meant those things at the wedding. Didn't he? Well, he didn't know who Ryan really was. Exactly. That's the point, I said quietly. Silence. You have to understand, she continued carefully. Your father has always protected this family's legacy. By humiliating his daughter? That wasn't his intention. I thought about something Margaret had told me during our last meeting. Something she almost hadn't shared. I saw the email, I said calmly. Natalie went silent. The one you sent Dad 2 days before my wedding. Her breathing changed. What email? The lie was automatic. I opened the screenshot on my phone. You wrote, let her struggle for a few months. She'll come crawling back once she realizes what she gave up. Natalie didn't respond. You didn't defend me, I continued. You helped plan my punishment. The silence stretched long enough that I thought she might hang up. Finally she whispered. That was taken out of context. I laughed softly. No, I said. It wasn't. I took a breath. I'm not angry anymore. That part surprised me because it was true. I'm just done. What does that mean? She asked quietly. It means if you want to be part of my life, you'll have to earn it. And your father? I thought about him. Same rules. I hung up before she could answer. Some boundaries are built with silence. My father came alone. No driver. No assistants. No tailored 3-piece suit. Just a tired man standing outside our apartment door one afternoon. Ryan opened it. My father looked different. Smaller somehow. May I come in? He asked quietly. Ryan stepped aside. My father walked into our living room and looked around. The second-hand couch. The modest kitchen. The framed photos from our wedding. He didn't criticize anything. He just sat down slowly. I lost 3 partnerships this week, he said. I leaned against the counter. The Nexus deal is dead. And now the board is discussing whether I should step down as CEO. He gave a bitter laugh. Turns out public humiliation has consequences. I didn't say anything. Finally he looked at Ryan. I owe you an apology. Ryan stayed silent. Then my father turned to me. I was wrong, he said. About Ryan. About you. About what actually matters. I had waited my entire life to hear those words. But now that they came, I didn't feel victorious. Just tired. I don't need an apology, I said quietly. Then what do you need? I thought for a moment. I need you to understand something. He nodded. I was happy before I knew Ryan was rich. I gestured toward our apartment. I was happy here. Building my own life. My father listened carefully. I didn't marry him for money, I continued. I married him because he respects me. Ryan looked at me quietly. And if you want to be part of my life, I finished, you'll have to accept that. My father nodded slowly. I'm trying. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a start. 1 year later, Thornton Creative had 15 employees. My small marketing firm had grown into something real. Not because of Ryan's money. Not because of my father's connections. But because clients trusted the work we did. Ryan still visited his garage on weekends. He said fixing engines reminded him who he was before the billions. Sometimes I joined him. Passing tools. Learning the names of car parts. My father was still learning too. He had started therapy. He asked me to coffee every few weeks. Sometimes we talked about business. Sometimes about life. Progress. Not perfection. That Christmas we spent the holidays at Ryan's mother's house in Wisconsin. A cozy home filled with laughter. No executives. No business deals. Just family. Snow fell softly outside the windows. Ryan wrapped his arm around me. Any regrets? He asked. I thought about the penthouse I lost. The inheritance that disappeared. The $200 million I would never see. Then I thought about the company I built. The freedom I gained. The love I found. Not a single one. He kissed me. And the snow kept falling. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. First, never let anyone define your worth by money. Not even family. Second, when people show you who they are, believe them. And when they suddenly change after learning your value, be careful. Third, real love doesn't ask you to shrink. It gives you space to grow. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to Women Reddit Stories, turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories, and drop a comment below. Tell me honestly. Should I have forgiven my father completely? I read every single one.